I always kind of come up with these images real intuitively, and I have all the elements in my head almost from the very beginning, but I don't know what the physicality of anything is going to be because I don't have any technology at my disposal to actually make these things. So the process of making big public artworks is basically a process of refinement and finding the technology that will reflect the original idea in a sort of in a way that's at least as good or hopefully better than the original idea.
Has a real strong function to it, has a real strong identity to it. It's going to be a place that people are going to identify in terms of the campus. It's going to be a place that people will come and meet, congregate, and do all that. But it's also very successful. I mean, as the role of this path, which was a really nice idea, gives it a sensuality and a character to it. And I like it because I think it actually goes beyond its concept. In other words, the concept interesting, but the execution is much more than interesting because it works on a lot of levels.
I think I'm always surprised at how much people like the snake path. I think of all the things that I've done, and I've done a lot of public things. I think the snake path is the one that has the widest appeal in the sense that it appeals to people, to all kinds of lay people and children, and it's something that's readily comprehensible and it strikes some kind of chord with people whether they know what it's about. And then it also appeals to the two groups of people who I think are the most hard to please of any, the most critical groups, which are architects and historians. So I think I've got the world covered with the snake path. I came to UCSD and I looked around the campus with Mary Beebe, and originally they were interested in having me do a collaborative plaza with an architect, and that didn't quite work out. And then I looked around for other possible places, and that time I was sort of thinking about, you know, some kind of a piece for a science building, some kind of relativity garden or something, and I had that in my head for a long time but never pinned it down. And I went to Brooklyn, New York, to install this big mural called Same Old Paradise that had giant oranges and a snake and a road that were sort of, the road came down and became a snake. And when I was in Brooklyn, I realized that it would be really great to make this a sort of real path that you could really walk on the snake. And I came back to UCSD, talked it over with Mary, and we found the perfect site, which was a site that didn't exist yet. It was actually a parking lot at the time, but it was going to be a hillside created from the underground addition to the university library. And the whole idea of sort of bringing this imagery of the Garden of Eden and paradise and the snake of temptation and the tree of knowledge and all these kinds of, all this sort of imagery to bear on the library was sort of like a perfect symbiotic combination. From the model and the drawing stage, the whole idea of the project had to be sort of integrated and accepted into the master plan of the university. Then there were all the technical issues associated with figuring out what to make the snake out of and how to make it work. And there was a lot of technical support. I had to work with a number of people. Probably the most influential was Matthew Gregoire of the Stuart collection, who is another artist, and he and I collaborated extensively on how this snake could actually lay onto the hillside and really look like a snake and yet fill all the sort of technical demands and solve all the problems of something that could really last for a long time in the landscape and have proper surface and proper drainage and really be a physical thing. It just was a long process. Also, the contractors were really critical. Glazer Tile Company was a tile company that built the piece, was very committed to doing it, and they made T-shirts that said Team Snake, and they put a lot of extra effort into trying to really make it a work of art and not just a thing, not just a pathway. The nice thing about the slate was it had a real shiny, organic kind of quality that snake skin really has. And looked at lots of slate, had like 50,000 slate samples sitting around my studio for 6 months, and tried to think of whether I liked this one better than that one, or that one better than this one, or whether these two went with that one, or, you know, and that kind of stuff. And eventually those sort of decisions get intuitively made if you get enough time to do it. One of the areas that was really simple on the drawing and the model and needed like a huge amount of refinement, one of those things where it just seemed like it was going to take care of itself, but then it turned out to be much more complicated than what I anticipated, was the little mini Garden of Eden. On the original sort of model, I think I had 2 apple trees and a bench in a sort of like circle with nothing in it. And immediately became clear that apple trees were really the wrong thing for this climate. And a little research turned up the sort of historical reality that the Garden of Eden evidently had quite a bit of different plants than what you would normally think. I mean, we normally just think of apple trees or whatever, but the Garden of Eden was probably somewhere in a kind of Middle Eastern type climate, and had multiple fruit trees and bulbs and spices and tropical plants, and it became a project to really try to find something that felt like everybody's conception of the garden, but also represented all the different plant groups that went along with the sort of historical basis of the garden. I mean, I think it was hard to figure out what the landscaping should be, because it was important that it had to meet the very crisp landscaping of the library, which was immutable and impossible to change, and it had to meet the very casual, natural chaparral landscaping of the ravine, and somehow those things had to come together in a way that you wouldn't think about them, and that it would seem natural and non-irritating, but without really being an element, so that the snake would be the most significant element. So everything else was intended to be a sort of attractive backdrop, I think, the surrounding landscape. The snake path has the kind of pastiche or collage quality I think that some of my other work has, because it brings together the giant kind of archetypal image of the snake, which is a real kind of cross-cultural and human sort of image. It puts it, I guess, into a biblical framework on one hand, which is the sort of the Garden of Eden and the idea of temptation and Adam and Eve and whatever, but it also makes a relationship between the innocence and sort of protected nature of paradise, makes an analogy to the university, and there's a quote from Milton on his giant copy of Paradise Lost, which is, and wilt thou not be loath to leave this paradise, yet shalt possess paradise within thee happier far. And most of my work has a kind of text basis to it, and I think that particular quote alludes to the idea that that you get a compensation for your loss of innocence because you get knowledge, and it's sort of appropriate to the university in the sense that when you leave the sort of sheltered kind of ivy covered halls of the academy, you go out into the big cruel world, but you have a certain compensation of knowledge to take with you. The great thing that happened, I think, to the snake is that, and it's something that happens when you build a big architectural thing that's so huge that you can't take it in all at one time, is that you can't see the snake all at one time, and in order to walk the snake, it takes a certain amount of time, and it's not like you just look at it and you see a snake and you grok a snake and you go, okay, it's a snake. You have to look at all the sort of the non-repeating pattern, the fact that it changes real subtly, and the fact that it's curved, and you have to stay on the curve and stay on the thing as you go up a hillside and stuff. It has such a physical experience, and I think that the snake has that kind of real child of all ages simplistic delight of this, this really organic, neat physical thing. Notwithstanding all of its sort of conceptual, artistic references to historical images and human images and human experience and writing and Milton and all those sorts of things, which are layers that you can superimpose on it to understand why it's there. But you still go back to the physical sensations of being on it and feeling it and almost being, it's a real rudimentary sensual experience. When you do work in the real world, there's a lot of pressure to integrate, to collaborate, to work things in, and inevitably, even though you try really hard to preserve your initial idea, there's a lot of pressure to compromise. And I think that the Stuart collection is an opportunity to almost do a piece exactly the way you imagine it, like you could do in a museum, but to do it like in a setting where it can be publicly enjoyed. So I think that's really a special thing.